When someone says USB, this is probably the shape that comes to your mind, but you should know that this isn't the only type of USB. This connector is called USB Type A, and it was the first USB design that introduced in 1996. Its goal was to replace all the different ports and also allow both data and power to pass through a single cable. USB also introduced a feature that older connectors didn't have, and that was plug and play. Plug and play means that when you connect a USB device to a computer, the computer can recognize and use it instantly without needing a restart. But older connectors like PS2 didn't work this way. For example, if you connected a PS2 mouse or keyboard while the computer was already turned on, the computer usually could not detect it. USB Type A has gone through many versions from USB 1 up to USB 3.2, and with each new version, the speed increased a lot. From USB 3 and later, ports became blue to show that they support super speed USB. However, this color is not required by the standard, and sometimes you can still see USB 3 ports in black, like on Asus ROG and TUF laptops. Today, USB Type A is used less than before, but it's still very common. You can find it on laptops, TVs, PCs, flash drives, servers, gaming consoles, radios, speakers, and even refrigerators. Besides the standard versions, USB Type A and Type B also had mini and micro versions. In the early 2000s, as devices became smaller and thinner, humans decided to create a smaller version of USB Type A called Mini Type A. This connector was slightly smaller than the standard version, but it used the same technology. It supported USB 2 with a maximum transfer speed of 480 megabits per second. However, because Mini Type A and Mini Type B were introduced around the same time, it was never released and was never used on any device. As devices became even smaller and thinner, micro-sized USB ports started to appear. Micro Type A is the smallest member of the USB Type A family. It supports USB 2 and offers the exact same maximum speed as Mini version. But once again, because newer and more advanced connectors from the USB Type B series became more popular, most people today don't even know that Micro and Mini Type A ever existed. You have probably seen this type of USB on printers. USB Type B is less common than Type A and Type C. It has several versions, including 1.1, 2, 3, 3.1, and 2, each with different speeds. Unlike Type A, the physical shape of the connector changes in USB 3 versions and becomes slightly larger. But why was Type B needed when Type A already existed? The answer is simple. The creators of USB did not want people to accidentally connect two computers directly together and damage their hardware. Because of this, USB Type A is usually used as the host connector, while USB Type B is the client or device side. But even though USB Type B was never as popular as Type A or C, printers and scanners used this connector for many years. If you are over 30, you probably remember this connector very well. Mini Type B was a smaller version of USB Type B. It was commonly used on old mobile phones and MP3 players, mostly for charging or connecting them to computers. It was available in USB 1.1 and USB 2 versions with a maximum data transfer speed of 480 megabits per second. But it did not stay popular for long because it was soon replaced by the king of USB connectors. Micro USB Type B, usually called just Micro USB, was the king of USB connectors until just a few years ago. You could find it on almost every device, including smartphones, power banks, game controllers, headphones, speakers, Raspberry Pi boards, and many other devices. Even the European Union encouraged companies to use micro USB as a common charging standard so people would not need many different chargers. It existed USB 2 and USB 3 versions. In USB 3, just like USB Type B, the physical shape changed and became wider. You may have seen this USB 3 version on external hard drives or on some phones like the Samsung Galaxy S5. Micro A also had a USB 3 version, but we can almost say it was never used anywhere. One interesting thing is that these connectors were designed to be backward compatible. This means you could still plug older USB cables into them, but the speed would be limited to USB 2 or lower levels because fewer pins. Anyway, even with all its popularity, micro USB started to disappear around 2016. The main reasons were that it wasn't reversible, it broke easily, and the port could become loose over time. In the end, it gave its place to the new king, USB Type-C. Before we move to the new king of USB, let's also talk about the Lightning connector. Since Apple always likes to make its own things after its older 30-pin connector, Apple introduced the Lightning port. Technically, Lightning is not a USB connector, but because it works very much like USB, people often talk about it alongside this family. Just like micro USB, Lightning could charge devices, connect to computers, and transfer data. Its speed was also similar to USB 2, but the main difference compared to micro USB was that Lightning was reversible. You could plug it in from either side, which made it much easier to use and reduced the chance of damage. Another feature was a small chip inside the cable. Apple used this chip to detect original and fake accessories. That's why if you used a low-quality or non-Apple cable, you would often see this message. But in the end, Apple also had to replace Lightning because of its lower speed and high production. And in 2023, starting with the iPhone 15 series, Apple finally switched to USB Type-C. USB Type-C is the newest and most modern USB connector. Just like USB Type-A replaced many older connectors before it, USB Type-C is now a powerful replacement for the rest of the USB types. It first appeared in devices around 2016, but it was actually introduced earlier in 2014. Its main goal was to be a single connector for charging devices, transferring files, video output, and almost everything else. USB Type-C comes in different versions, which the newest one is USB 4 version 2, which offers extremely high speeds of up to 80 gigabits or 10 gigabytes per second. It also supports more advanced power delivery technology than other USB types. This allows the power output to be adjusted intelligently for each device. That's why one USB-C cable can charge headphones, a phone, or even a gaming laptop. It also supports features called alternate modes, for example, DisplayPort for video output and Thunderbolt for transferring both video and data at very high speeds through one cable, which we already talked about in the Every DisplayPort video. However, there is one very important thing you need to know. Not every Type-C cable or port supports all of these features. So, when buying a cable, laptop, or phone, you need to make sure it supports the features you actually need. If we look at it strictly, this is also the main downside of USB-C. The same physical connector can include many different versions and technologies which can confuse users. But still, in the near future, USB-C will most likely become the only connector used on almost every device.